Every weekday, millions of kids step onto bright yellow buses, and most parents hardly give it a second thought. But here's the surprising part. In 2025, children are still about 70 times safer riding a school bus than riding in a car. This is the standard NHTSA and industry comparison. School buses transport millions more children while producing far fewer fatalities than cars. That's not chance. It's deliberate engineering. But how does a vehicle with no airbags and often no seatbelts accomplish this record? To answer that, we'll trace their history, their structure, their seating design, the technology that supports them, and even the people and rules that guide their daily use. Understanding how these buses became the safest ride for kids means starting with what came before them. From kid hacks to steel fortresses. It's strange to imagine now, but the buses we know as bright yellow steel fortresses began as little more than wagons on wheels. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many children rode to school in horse-drawn carriages nicknamed kid hacks. These wagons were simple and cheap, long wooden platforms with benches tacked along the sides, open to wind, rain, and snow. Their only purpose was to fit as many children as possible in one trip. Protection was never part of the design. A few boards separated them from the ground, and a jolting ride down uneven farm roads was simply the norm. Parents loaded children in any way, because at the time, transportation was measured in terms of convenience, not safety. When engines replaced horses, the design barely improved. Districts began modifying truck frames by attaching crude wooden cabins on top. These vehicles stood unnaturally tall and narrow, rocking unsteadily as they rolled along dirt and gravel roads. Their high centers of gravity made even mild cornering dangerous, and rollovers were common. Inside, there were no reinforcements. If one of these early buses tipped or skidded into trouble, wood splintered apart, metal tore loose, and children were fully exposed. And with no design standards, every manufacturer cut corners differently. Some stronger, many flimsier, and none built with real protection in mind. Beyond instability, fire posed a constant lethal risk. Fuel tanks sat against the outer body, right where collisions could rupture them. Seats were stuffed with flammable material, and a leaking line or small spark could sweep through the cabin before anyone escaped. Roofs, thin and poorly braced, collapsed quickly in heat or impact. Exits were sparse, often limited to a single narrow door, leaving dozens of children trapped in emergencies. Rollovers and fires weren't rare or abstract dangers. Accidents killed students outright or left stories of gruesome wreckage in local newspapers. Families of the period were aware of these risks, yet most placed their trust in vehicles that were essentially wooden crates balanced on wheels. That situation began to change as tragedies accumulated. Accidents that made headlines pushed school administrators and communities to demand more accountability from builders. Still, for many years, bus safety depended almost entirely on a district's budget. Wealthier communities could pay for sturdier, more enclosed bodies, while poorer rural areas often relied on whatever cheap models were available. For one child, riding to school might mean a relatively robust vehicle. For another, it was little different from the horse-drawn wagons of a generation before. Safety was uneven, inconsistent, and often an accident of geography. Early standard-setting efforts appeared in the 1920s, with tentative requirements for sturdier seating, defined entry and exit doors, and driver enclosures. The most pivotal moment arrived in 1939, when a national conference brought manufacturers together and finalized sweeping measures under the guidance of Dr. Frank Sear. That meeting did more than create paperwork. It locked in benchmarks for everything from roof structure and emergency exits to the now iconic color chosen for visibility. School bus yellow was no accident. It was scientifically selected to stand out in virtually any light or weather, making buses more noticeable on roads filled with dark, muted cars. This was a turning point. Passenger safety finally gained equal weight with efficiency and cost. From that era forward, the engineering philosophy shifted. The bus was no longer an improvised shell sitting on a truck frame. Designers began building with steel reinforcements, heavier beams, and specialized floor and roof supports. Windows were shrunk and strengthened to resist shattering. Emergency exits multiplied, at the back, along the sides, and eventually above, so there was always a way out. Fuel tanks were isolated, shielded, and placed away from routine collision points. These were deliberate answers to the disasters of earlier decades. Fires once fed by flimsy designs now met reinforced barriers, rollovers that once splintered a wooden cabin were slowed by the strength of a steel cage. The scale of the problem made these changes urgent. Today, nearly 25 million students ride school buses daily. That volume highlights why every improvement matters. For each rider to reach school and back home safely, design needed to anticipate rare but devastating accidents, and regulations had to make safety uniform across wealthy districts and cash-strapped communities alike. The reforms of the 1930s and 1940s began that process, and each generation of buses since then has built a tighter web of protection around its passengers. Looking back creates a striking contrast. On one hand, the kid hacks offered nothing more than planks on wheels. Early motorized models were unstable, fire-prone boxes cobbled together from spare materials. On the other hand, today's buses have been hardened into massive boxy machines that look slow and unglamorous but carry an unmatched safety record. They are reliable for reasons parents rarely see: redundant exits, tucked-away fuel systems, reinforcements hidden under painted panels. All of it arose not from marketing flair, but from decades of responding to disaster and folding each lesson into the next round of designs. In the progression from fragile wagons to reinforced giants, the critical shift has always been structural. The old designs gave way to buses built like frameworks on wheels, in which force is controlled instead of allowed to collapse the body. The knowledge that earlier generations lacked about crash dynamics, fire behavior, and rollover stability was eventually built into every beam and joint. Those decisions, one layer at a time, turned the school bus into a vehicle defined not by looks or speed, but by resilience. And yet that leaves one essential question. What, exactly, makes them so able to withstand impacts that crush smaller vehicles? To answer that, we need to take a closer look at the hidden design that holds the entire bus together. The steel skeleton secret. What makes a school bus survive crashes that flatten smaller cars isn't obvious from the outside. To most people, it looks like a giant box on wheels. Yet after severe collisions, photos often show buses still standing tall, their frames intact even when glass is shattered and panels are bent. The explanation lies in an internal framework hidden beneath the paint, a rigid steel skeleton that holds the passenger space together when everything else is under extreme stress. Unlike cars that depend on outer shells to manage crashes, buses rely on this internal cage to keep the cabin from collapsing. The way cars and buses approach safety is almost the opposite. Passenger cars use crumple zones, those thin front and rear sections designed to bend and fold on impact. They work because energy gets absorbed before reaching the people inside, and airbags and restraints handle the rest. But this kind of design has limits. When a car flips, the same pillars and roof rails that were meant to protect start folding inward under the vehicle's weight, forcing the cabin down onto occupants. Bus engineers didn't want that trade-off. Instead, they built around thick beams that are locked into a cross-braced system. In a crash, the frame doesn't give up sections of itself. It spreads the pressure across the entire skeleton so that no single piece has to fail. It's easier to picture using a simple comparison. Think of a soda can versus a steel bridge. The can is light and made to crush easily, which is fine if you need a container that absorbs force. A bus is more like a bridge, rigid, connected, and able to pass loads smoothly across multiple supports. For buses, that means when a side or the roof is struck, the force doesn't stay local. Stress is transferred into the vertical beams, then into the frame beneath the floor, and onward throughout the body. The shape resists caving in because every part is tied to the next. And remember, many school buses weigh up to 15 times more than a typical car. That greater mass usually means crashes stretch across longer deceleration times, so forces get distributed more gradually instead of spiking through the passenger space all at once. That's why accident images of school buses often show a recognizable outline even in severe rollovers. The windows break, the side panels deform, but the tall rectangular cage remains upright. The extra ceiling clearance above the seats acts as a buffer, so even if the bus tips over, children aren't immediately pressed against the ground. The reinforced skeleton keeps the roof from buckling, leaving escape routes open and preserving enough space for movement. It transforms a catastrophic rollover, one of the deadliest events in passenger cars, into something survivable. Weight also shapes why engineers chose rigidity over crumpling. A bus isn't just heavier than an average car, it's massively heavier, with enormous momentum on the road. Designing crumple zones thick enough To absorb those forces would require impractically huge amounts of material. Instead, engineers leaned on the strength of a welded grid that resists collapse. The rigidity protects the cabin by refusing to give way, and the vehicle size spreads out the energy so children inside experience less violent jolts. Put simply, it's safer to prevent the collapse entirely than to let the frame crumble and hope the padding or restraints make up for it. This approach goes further than surviving once a bus rolls. It helps prevent rollovers from happening in the first place. Tall, boxy vehicles tend to tip under sharp or uneven forces, but with a cage tying the top, sides, and bottom into one solid block, the structure resists twisting. When one side lifts, the skeleton pulls against itself, sharing the weight and reducing the chance the bus will topple. That design choice makes buses more stable on winding rural roads or fast lane changes than their height alone would suggest. Stability is a safety feature. Keeping a vehicle from flipping removes the riskiest type of crash before it starts. Side impacts also reveal why buses stand apart. In cars, doors and windows are weak points. Another vehicle striking from the side can break through with little resistance, leaving occupants exposed. Arrive at the side of a bus and you'll find tightly spaced steel posts bracing the walls like a grid. Behind the painted panels, these beams form barriers that prevent intrusion. They don't necessarily stop dents or broken glass, but they stop the cabin from collapsing inward. You can think of it like scaffolding behind a facade. Even if the surface breaks, the structure remains upright. The difference between cars and buses becomes sharper when you imagine the crash forces step by step. In a car rollover, one roof support takes the brunt of the force until it buckles, then the load concentrates onto the next, and soon the structure folds completely. Occupants are pinned before seatbelts or airbags can matter. In a bus, the opposite happens. One beam takes tension, passes it immediately to its neighbors, and the whole cage shares the stress. By the time it settles, dozens of bars have absorbed and dispersed the energy, and the cabin shape stays intact. It's not glamorous design, but it saves lives by preventing collapse long enough for passengers to escape. Parents mostly see the glossy yellow sides and broad windows when a bus drives by, but beneath that is a carefully engineered barrier system. The painted metal panels act as cosmetic skin and initial contact layer, while the skeleton underneath serves as the true armor. That's why in many crashes buses remain upright and recognizable while other vehicles end up twisted beyond recognition. This hidden cage isn't just an invisible bonus, it dictates how the entire accident unfolds, steering energy paths away from the children sitting inside. The approach is unusual compared to most vehicles on the road. Almost every car is designed to crumple because adults are belted in, airbags trigger instantly, and masses are relatively low. A flexible frame makes sense there. For buses, with dozens of unbelted children in one compartment, energy absorption inside the cabin would be disastrous. If the frame gave way, the seats themselves wouldn't matter. Children would be trapped in a collapsing box. Rigidity is the logical alternative. By making the whole vehicle act as one brace system, buses turn their size into the very thing that protects their passengers. Of course, that rigid skeleton is only one part of the safety package. Other details, from the way the seats are built to the way emergency exits are arranged, only work because that frame protects the surrounding space. Without the cage, those measures would collapse along with the cabin. But with it, the structure stays intact long enough for the rest of the safety systems to matter. That skeleton matters, but it only solves one set of problems. Next, how we keep kids inside that safe space without buckles. Why no seatbelts isn't neglect. One of the details that surprises most parents when they first step onto a school bus is what they don't see. In family cars, every passenger has a seatbelt, airbags hide in the dash, and the expectation is that safety comes from strapping in. On a bus, it looks the opposite. Rows of tall padded seats line the aisle, but no buckles click across laps and no airbags wait to deploy. For many families, this feels unsettling, almost like an oversight. But what looks like missing equipment is actually intentional. It reflects a design philosophy unique to buses, one built around the principle of compartmentalization. Compartmentalization shifts the role of protection away from belts and airbags and into the structure of the seating itself. Each seat back rises above a child's head, is thickly padded, and sits only a short distance from the next row. In the engineering model, children don't need to be strapped in place, instead, They are surrounded by cushioned surfaces meant to absorb forward movement. If a crash occurs, momentum carries them into the padded back in front of them rather than into a hard surface or piece of equipment. Each row doubles as a soft barrier, turning the cabin into a repeating series of compartments that insulate children from violent impacts. The seats work in more sophisticated ways than they first appear. Rather than acting as immovable walls, the frames flex slightly, releasing energy when struck. That controlled give reduces shock in the same way a spring reacts under pressure. Spacing is carefully measured. Openings are close enough that children can't build dangerous speed before striking the seat ahead, but not so tight that legs are cramped. The high padded backs ensure the torso, not the head or neck, bears contact with the cushioning. Put together, the elements mimic a cocoon effect, a passive shield engineered to manage how young bodies move during a collision. The principle feels counterintuitive because most parents compare buses to cars. In a car, no seatbelt means serious risk. A sudden stop sends bodies into dashboards, windows, or worse, out of the vehicle. On a bus, though, physics shifts the equation. Weight is the biggest factor. A full-size bus can weigh 10 to 15 times more than a family sedan. That much mass doesn't stop suddenly. It decelerates over longer intervals. When crashes unfold, the change in speed is stretched out, lowering the forces inside. Children may tilt or slide forward, but the contact is slow enough for padded seats to absorb effectively. That difference in momentum explains why restraints are essential in cars but not the cornerstone of safety in buses. Recognizing how this works can alleviate some discomfort but not all of it. Parents still worry about the flexibility children have inside the cabin. Standing, leaning sideways, shifting around. Compartmentalization is most effective when riders stay seated properly. And that is where skepticism re-emerges. Why not include belts anyway, as backup? The answer is layered. Installing them could make rides less safe overall if children misuse the restraints. Younger students may place belts incorrectly across necks or stomachs, creating its own dangers in sudden stops. Older students sometimes ignore them entirely. Unlike cars, where adults are present to correct misuse, bus drivers cannot check dozens of children across multiple rows without distracting from the road. Another complication is how restraints affect capacity. Adding seatbelts tightens spacing, often reducing the number of passengers per bus. That forces districts to run additional routes or move more children back into family cars, statistically far less safe. Industry analyses and federal discussions also underscore the logistical barrier. Retrofitting an entire nationwide fleet would be extremely costly and complex. For many cash-strapped districts, that expense diverts funds from broader safety measures that benefit every bus on the road, like reinforced structures, extended mirrors, or driver training. Still, some states have chosen to add belts under certain conditions. A small number, including California, New York, New Jersey, Florida, and Texas, require lap shoulder restraints on specific types of buses, with variations tied to funding or vehicle size. These rules reflect ongoing debates more than consensus standards. Investigators such as the National Transportation Safety Board have acknowledged that while compartmentalization protects well in common frontal crashes, lap shoulder belts may improve outcomes in side collisions or rollovers. The measures are not universal, but they illustrate how policies evolve as research grows. The science behind compartmentalization also extends beyond crash forces. Consider what children can strike inside a bus. In a passenger car, an unbelted rider risks colliding with glass, door frames, consoles, or steering wheels. In a bus, interiors deliberately remove those hazards. Surfaces have padding, corners soften, and exposed hardpoints are minimized. Nearly all motion funnels forward into seatbacks designed for that purpose. This regulation of space is what makes a restraint-free system viable. Children meet only surfaces engineered to absorb them. At the same time, experts recognize that no system is perfect. Compartmentalization works best when buses remain upright and stops are frontal. Severe conditions, like heavy side impacts or complete rollovers, test its limits. That's why the conversation around belts hasn't disappeared. But every push to install them runs into the reality that transport safety is not only about equipment, it's about practical application. Making a safeguard reliable means building it to work even when children forget instructions, ignore guidelines, or rush off the bus in distraction. Compartmentalization meets that test by requiring no active participation from passengers. For decades, statistics have reflected the success of this approach. Year after year, data show that school buses, without belts, carry millions of children with dramatically fewer fatalities compared to private vehicles where belts are universal. The consistency of those numbers argues that the philosophy of protecting children through structure, mass, and seat design is working. What looks strange, even risky at first glance, reveals itself as a different solution to the same problem. In the end, the absence of seatbelts is not neglect but an intentional trade-off. Engineers designed these buses assuming young passengers can't be counted on to strap in properly every time, but they can be surrounded by cushions, beams, and compartments that never forget their role. The outcome is a safety system built into the cabin itself, one that doesn't rely on perfect behavior to function. Families riding the familiar yellow buses each morning rarely think about steel cages or compartment padding. What stands out most is the appearance of the vehicle itself. That look is no accident either. Choices about how a bus catches the eye are as vital as the unseen framework inside. And the next safety feature works before a crash even happens. It ensures that the bus gets noticed in the first place. The science of the giant yellow billboard. If there's one feature of school buses that nobody overlooks, it's the color. No matter the state, no matter the district, they all share the same unmistakable bright yellow body. That choice wasn't a stroke of stylistic branding. It was established as a national standard at the 1939 conference that set the foundation for bus safety rules. Researchers at the time had identified that yellow is one of the quickest colors for the human eye to detect in low light. That one insight turned into a requirement that has outlasted nearly every other early regulation, because visibility remains a tool that prevents accidents before they unfold. The science behind that choice is deceptively simple. Our eyes respond differently to each color in the spectrum, and yellow sits in a range that the retina identifies rapidly even when light is fading. Compared to darker car bodies or road surfaces, the painted bus surface jumps out of the visual field almost immediately. That reaction time, measured in fractions of a second, may not sound like much, but at highway speeds, a fraction of a second equals dozens of feet of extra time to hit the brakes or steer away. The result of standardizing that hue was measurable. By making buses detectable from farther away in fog, rain, or pre-dawn hours, the chance of drivers noticing them in time to avoid mistakes improved dramatically. Unlike aesthetic paint jobs that reflect preference, the shade known as school bus yellow is carefully defined so it performs consistently against almost any backdrop. Whether the vehicle is parked against snowbanks, traveling through wooded highways, or idling in misty early mornings, its surface contrasts against its surroundings. That consistency ensures that drivers don't just see a vehicle, they register a priority object requiring caution. If the paint were darker, muted, or varied from place to place, that instant recognition would vanish. Instead, uniformity provides an early warning system to anyone sharing the road. That gives the paint job an unusual status among bus safety measures. Steel cages, energy-absorbing seats, and updated brakes all protect passengers in a crash, but the color works upstream of all those layers. It reduces how often those other defenses are even needed. From a cost-benefit perspective, a coat of standard yellow paint is one of the simplest adjustments ever mandated in transport design, yet its payoff is seen in accidents prevented before they can happen. Consider how this plays out in ordinary daily use. In midwinter, children often meet their buses while it's still dark out. Rural highways may wrap in fog or heavy rain, where headlights alone can blur into diffused halos. The yellow surface breaks that haze in peripheral vision, drawing the gaze of an approaching driver before conscious recognition sets in. On side roads, at intersections, or when emerging from a driveway, that split-second recognition creates space to brake, pause, or give way. It's an advantage that lights and reflective panels reinforce, but the base color is already doing essential work in advance. Psychology supports it as well. Drivers share a learned association. Yellow signals demand attention. Road warning signs, traffic lights shifting to caution, and hazard markings all rely on the same color. A large yellow shape approaching in traffic becomes part of that system. Drivers may not think the words school bus, but their brains trigger the same reflex built for warnings. Slow down, prepare to react. That familiarity makes buses visible not only to careful drivers but to distracted or drowsy ones. Even inattentive eyes are more likely to catch yellow than filter out muted tones blending with the environment. It helps to see how unusual buses are in this regard. Personal vehicles come in colors chosen for appearance: black, silver, blue, none designed with detection in mind. Trucks and vans often match company livery, again relying on stylistic branding rather than visual performance. The bus ignores preference completely. Every district, private company, and manufacturer paints vehicles in the same color because attention, not aesthetics, is the priority. Taken together, the effect can start to look like a mobile fleet of warning signs moving daily across cities and towns. Some liken them to rolling billboards, not of products, but of safety itself. The consistency also matters for how drivers interpret movements around stopped buses. When a bus engages its flashing red lights and extends its stop arm, the color amplifies the cue. Even before those lights trigger, a motorist catching sight of the yellow shape knows the situation ahead likely involves children entering or leaving the roadway. That expectation primes caution earlier than the specific warning system. Without it, each vehicle might require close inspection before a driver recognizes its function. With it, every glimpse of yellow sharpens. Reaction, often subconsciously. It's worth noting how this ties back to accident data. Many rear-end collisions, side swipes, or near misses occur because one driver fails to notice another vehicle quickly enough. While visibility isn't a metric often publicized, safety research has shown that simply standardizing school bus yellow as the national norm reduced these risks by demanding attention at greater distances. No other single paint requirement carries such a legacy of safety payoff in American transportation. So when buses are compared across decades, the reinforced beams, safety glass, and improved brakes all show technological evolution. But the color has stayed constant, and for good reason. Unlike equipment that must be maintained, recalibrated, or replaced, paint continues to perform each day with no extra effort. Over millions of miles and millions of trips, that reliability keeps multiplying into avoided accidents, none of which make headlines because they never occur. The outcome is plain. Yellow turned buses into objects that resist invisibility. They can't blend into background scenery, they can't hide in dim light, and they can't be mistaken for ordinary traffic. That visibility prevents crashes as effectively as almost any mechanical safeguard. But of course, seeing a bus is only the first step. Drivers still miss hazards concealed by the size of the vehicle itself, and children can still be caught in positions where mirrors or eyes don't naturally reach. Visibility from paint keeps buses noticed, but preventing the blind spots that surround them on crowded roads requires another set of solutions entirely. Advanced eyes and ears. Modern tech upgrades. A school bus may look simple from the outside, but for the person in the driver's seat, that big yellow rectangle poses real challenges. Unlike a car, where mirrors give a fairly complete picture of nearby traffic, a bus hides entire sections of the road. The length makes it impossible to see directly behind, the height creates blind zones around smaller vehicles, and the wide front blocks children who walk just a few feet in front of the bumper. Without help, those blind spots would turn routine neighborhoods and crowded stops into daily hazards. That's why modern safety depends as much on cameras, sensors, and monitoring as on steel frames or padded seating. The earliest solution to the visibility problem was mirrors, but not the same kind cars use. Buses use cross-view mirrors, large convex mirrors mounted at the front corners. They bend light enough to reveal what's directly in front of the hood, showing children who would otherwise be invisible. Oversized side mirrors extend sight down the length of the vehicle, covering corners that act like blind walls. Their placement isn't random. Federal standards specify where each mirror must sit so a driver can scan critical danger zones with quick glances. Mirrors alone, though, can't guarantee coverage. Weather, glare, rain, and the difficulty of checking multiple reflections at once all leave room for slips in attention. That gap led districts to add cameras. Backup cameras now appear on most new buses, providing drivers with live views of what's behind as they reverse, no longer a guessing game. A child walking into that space, a parent's car creeping too close, or even a bicycle crossing paths can be seen instantly on a screen instead of discovered too late. In environments where buses load or unload children in tight spaces, that single visual feed removes a major risk. Systems now extend beyond one camera. Many buses are being equipped with 360-degree camera arrays that stitch together the feed from several cameras placed around the vehicle. On a dash screen, It appears as if the driver is looking at the bus from above, complete with surrounding roads, sidewalks, and vehicles. Instead of juggling different perspectives, the driver interprets one composite image. Industry trials indicate this setup helps prevent overlooked hazards in dense urban traffic, where mirrors and single cameras sometimes miss movement at the edges of the vehicle. Technology doesn't stop with cameras. Stop-arm cameras automatically activate when the bus extends its red light stop paddle. These units record plate numbers of cars that illegally pass while children are boarding or exiting, one of the most serious dangers in school transport. The scale of the problem is sobering. Survey samples extrapolate tens of millions of illegal passings per school year, with tens of thousands recorded in just a single survey day. In response, several districts have used automated enforcement programs, and industry reports show those programs cut violations by roughly 1/3 to as much as 40% within the first year of deployment. These numbers don't mean violations vanish, but they mark a measurable impact where the risk was once constant. Beyond enforcement, some buses layer in radar and other sensors. A child stepping too close to the front or side can trigger an audible alert. More advanced packages even integrate automatic emergency braking, or AEB. In practice, that means if the system detects a pedestrian entering the danger zone, the bus can apply the brakes on its own, useful in the rare cases when even a cautious driver doesn't react fast enough. The purpose of these technologies is immediate. Stop-arm cameras catch plate numbers after the fact. AEB prevents impact altogether. It's worth noting how these layers complement each other. Mirrors provide real-time situational awareness, but they depend on driver attention. Cameras reduce blind spots by presenting clearer images. Sensors add warnings that pierce through distraction, and AEB can physically intervene in emergencies. Each addresses a different weakness in human attention or vehicle size. Together, they create redundancy. If one measure falls short, another steps in. Monitoring no longer stops at the edge of the road. GPS trackers make buses observable in real time. Districts can see where each vehicle is, its current speed, and whether it's following its assigned path. For parents, smartphone apps connect to these systems, sending alerts as a bus nears a stop so children aren't left waiting on curbsides unnecessarily. Those reduced wait times create a subtle but important result: less time for kids to stand in or near traffic unsupervised. The same GPS feeds help districts analyze operator performance. Hard braking events, excessive speed, unscheduled stops, or extended idling now show up in reports that managers can review daily. A driver who brakes aggressively too often can receive coaching before it becomes a chronic risk. A bus that shows repeated unusual delays might point to mechanical performance issues. What used to be invisible, small lapses accumulating over time, now appears in the data and prompts intervention. Dense city environments sharpen the need for all of these tools. Buses maneuver through streets narrowed by parked cars, with bicyclists weaving in and out and pedestrians stepping into crosswalks at unexpected times. A high driving position gives good forward range but makes obstacles directly around the bus harder to detect. Technology compensates for these limitations. Cameras see what eyes miss, sensors call out sudden risks, and GPS ensures other staff always know each vehicle's status. There's also a behavioral effect to having these systems in place. Drivers aware that cameras record their maneuvers and GPS tracks their speed often adopt more cautious habits. That accountability, knowing that unsafe braking, missed stops, or failure to follow procedure won't disappear unnoticed, nudges them towards safer routines. In practice, technology works not just by preventing accidents mechanically but by influencing overall conduct on the road. Taken together, the upgrades create an environment where operating a 40-foot vehicle in crowded traffic becomes practical without relying solely on one person's line of sight. Cross-view mirrors show the child at the bumper, backup cameras clear blind zones during reversals, 360 systems provide an instant map of surroundings, stop-arm cameras enforce laws against violators, and AEB adds a fail-safe barrier when humans react too late. At the same time, GPS and monitoring software keep districts and parents informed while reinforcing discipline among drivers. Each element reduces a piece of the risk that size and bulk would otherwise amplify. All of this makes a big vehicle more manageable and far safer than it once was. Yet no matter how much technology surrounds the bus with electronic eyes and ears, there's one reality it cannot change: other drivers' choices. A careless motorist ignoring a stop arm, or a distracted parent rolling too close to a stop, can still create danger that even the best tools can't erase. That gap, between what machines can prevent and what humans choose to do, puts the spotlight on the most critical safeguard of all: training the people behind the wheel. A bus can be reinforced with steel frames, equipped with cameras, and covered in high-visibility paint, but none of it matters without the right person controlling it. Drivers are not casual hires. They must complete specialized licensing, background checks, medical exams, and continuous training before being trusted with the job. The safe transport of students, day after day, depends on their preparation as much as on any piece of engineering. The first major qualification is the Commercial Driver's License, or CDL, which extends far beyond what an ordinary driver's license requires. School bus operators must also obtain special endorsements, sometimes labeled S or P, depending on jurisdiction, that focus on transporting passengers and meeting school bus-specific rules. Licensing has several layers: written exams on traffic laws and vehicle operation, hands-on tests handling large vehicles, and checks that demonstrate they can perform. Required safety inspections. Background screenings run in parallel, examining driving history, criminal records, and past employment to confirm candidates are safe around children. These screening steps are as critical as the driving lessons themselves. Different regions impose their own programs. For instance, Ontario's school bus operators typically undergo over 50 hours of training before gaining certification. Alberta's S endorsement mandates a 15-hour classroom module followed by practical assessments. In the United States, most states require a mix of classroom instruction, simulation, and supervised behind-the-wheel practice. The details vary, but the message is consistent. Operating a school bus isn't about simply steering a large vehicle. It's about meeting standards designed around transporting minors safely. That training begins with bus-specific driving maneuvers that most motorists would never practice. Instead of parallel parking a sedan, trainees navigate cones that mimic tight school parking lots. They practice approaching crosswalks until the bumper stops exactly where it should for children to cross safely in front. They learn to manage large mirrors and cameras to eliminate blind spots, often rehearsing until they can sweep their eyes quickly between reflections without hesitation. Pre-trip inspections are another unique drill. Drivers learn to walk around the bus and check tire pressure, lights, stop arms, and emergency exits before every shift. These small tasks prevent mechanical surprises that could become major safety violations on the road. Emergency preparedness is another core skill. Classroom instruction is supplemented with evacuation drills where drivers guide children through rear doors, side exits, or roof hatches depending on the scenario. Instructors time these drills to emphasize efficiency, but also stress calmness. Children in emergencies copy the adult's tone. Drivers are trained to project control, preventing panic from spreading. Simulations include fires, medical emergencies, or slippery road conditions, each repeated until responses become automatic. Seconds matter in these situations, and proper drills ensure a real event feels less like chaos and more like carrying out familiar steps. Managing the passengers themselves is equally important. A bus driver is part operator and part supervisor. Children often move, talk, or argue during rides, and if behavior escalates, the distraction can be just as dangerous as a mechanical failure. Training programs address these realities with situational strategies: how to de-escalate conflict without shouting, how to keep children seated, and how to use authority without provoking defiance. That focus on emotional control is deliberate. Technology can monitor activity but can't prevent a child from standing in the aisle while the bus is moving. Only a driver with presence and communication skills can do that. Once licensed, school bus drivers don't coast on one-time qualifications. They undergo regular medical checks to verify stamina, reflexes, hearing, and vision. They also face periodic recertification, which may include portions of the CDL exam or supplementary classroom refreshers on regulations. Unlike many motorists who rarely rethink road laws after their first test, school bus operators are reminded by design. Their knowledge and health are reviewed on a schedule. Training and recertification are frequent and include both medical and behavioral components, guarding against complacency. Ongoing drills reinforce that cycle. Annual sessions often revisit evacuation, hazard recognition, and student management under changing conditions. Districts tailor these exercises to the routes they manage. A driver covering rural roads may practice on dirt tracks in adverse weather. while urban drivers rehearse sharp turns through constricted intersections busy with cyclists and pedestrians. Local context changes the hazards, so localities invest in modeling real conditions during practice. That preparation means drivers are not surprised when the same challenges arise on active routes. Rules of the road are also drilled repeatedly. Stop arm laws, for instance, are a defining part of the driver's responsibility. Operators must extend mechanical stop signs, activate flashing lights, and closely monitor traffic every time children enter or exit. If an approaching car ignores the red signals, the driver is trained to hold children at the curb until the danger passes. They rehearse head counts, scanning both sides of the street, and waiting until children are fully clear before moving again. These stop-check routines become habits reinforced by both training and policy. Oversight systems make sure those habits persist over months and years. Many operators equip in-cab coaching systems or event recorders that capture hard braking or unusual movements. Supervisors can review this feedback to identify unsafe practices and intervene quickly. With retraining, this isn't optional enrichment. It's built into the professional landscape of bus driving. Tools like GPS logs make it possible to spot speed violations or unscheduled stops days or weeks after they occur. Combined with unannounced ride-alongs or parent feedback, these checks keep drivers attentive and maintain public trust in their reliability. These measures illustrate how the role is continually tested. Driving a bus isn't about completing one long course and being left alone afterward. It's a cycle. Licensing and endorsement secure the job, targeted drills shape specific skills, medical and legal recertifications refresh competence, and monitoring enforces standards. The consistency across jurisdictions may differ in detail, but the structure is the same. No single stage is treated as final. Accountability follows throughout a driver's career. Put together, this level of preparation shifts the perception of who is behind the wheel. Parents may see drivers, but districts prepare and monitor professionals operating complex equipment while ensuring dozens of young riders behave safely in motion. Their qualifications blend technical expertise with patience, crisis management, and an awareness of legal obligations. The steel cages, cameras, and flashing lights support safety, but the person steering, the trained, monitored, recertified individual, remains at the center of that system. The result is a transportation workforce built not only on machines and regulations, but on constant human oversight. Buses are engineered for safety, but those designs assume skilled operators carry them out. Without the preparation of those operators, even the best engineered system would carry greater risks. Yet for all the training that protects children during the ride, the most critical challenges often appear when the doors open and students step into their surroundings. That transition between the cabin and the street introduces risks no amount of structural reinforcement inside the bus can fully resolve. The dangerous zone, outside the bus. The greatest threats to children don't appear while they're seated on the bus. The real risk emerges in the space surrounding it, the area transportation officials call the danger zone. This is the 10-foot radius around the vehicle where vision is limited, movements are unpredictable, and drivers passing by can create deadly hazards within seconds. National analyses underline this reality. More children have died in incidents outside buses, while boarding, leaving, or from drivers illegally passing, than inside during crashes. Pedestrians make up a significant share of school transportation fatalities, a fact that reshapes where the focus of protection must be. When drivers pull to a stop, every movement that follows is orchestrated to reduce that risk. Hazard lights flash, the stop arm swings out, and only then do the doors open. Children step forward in line, waiting for a signal from the driver before crossing. These actions look like ritual, but the intent is simple: reduce confusion. Confusion is dangerous in the danger zone, often leading to hesitation, darting movements, or steps into blind spots where even a trained driver can't react fast enough. The stop arm sign signals that all surrounding traffic must halt. In nearly every state, this requirement carries heavy fines and license penalties. The law establishes a protective buffer so children can cross without interference from vehicles in either direction. But written statutes don't guarantee compliance. Despite the clear red lights, tens of thousands of illegal passings are documented in single-day surveys, with those numbers projected to tens of millions each school year. Behind those violations are dozens of fatalities in recent decades, evidence of how often laws are ignored in practice. That tension, between the safety the law promises and the behavior of drivers who break it, explains why so much infrastructure now exists to reinforce the zone. Stop arm cameras are one of the most direct tools. As soon as the arm extends, they record the plate numbers of cars that pass illegally. Enforcement programs using this evidence have documented drops in violations, in some districts cutting repeat offenses by a third or more. By making punishment for infractions more consistent, they change behavior in ways a single human driver never could. The physical setup of the bus itself also contributes. Many fleets install mechanical crossing gates, rods that swing out from the bumper whenever doors open. Their simple function is powerful. They force children to walk at least 10 feet in front of the bus before crossing, bringing them into the driver's view. Without these gates, small children can vanish into the blind zone directly under the windshield, a space wide enough to hide a moving child entirely. Crossing gates extend that path outward, turning an invisible hazard into a visible line the driver can monitor. Training for drivers reinforces these protective layers. They are taught to never assume compliance from nearby motorists. Even after extending the stop arm, they pause and scan lanes in both directions before signaling children to cross. The habit is drilled until reflexive. Look, hold, wait, then wave forward. Waiting 10 seconds may frustrate an impatient driver behind the wheel, but for the child crossing in front, it closes the gap between assumption and certainty. That extra check accounts for the reality that flashing lights don't always translate into obedience. Students themselves are taught structured behaviors. Beginning in kindergarten, they rehearse rules: never run across, wait for the driver's nod, and walk at least 10 feet in front of the bus before turning toward their destination. These drills repeat each year, ensuring children know not to pass behind the vehicle and not to linger in the roadway. When followed, these routines shrink exposure to hazards, even if outside drivers behave recklessly. Mistakes do occur, children darting forward or forgetting the signal, but the layered approach makes it less likely those lapses lead to tragedy. Together, the tools of protection around the danger zone include stop arm laws that require traffic to halt, mechanical crossing gates that keep children visible, crossing guard drills that structure how kids move, and stop arm cameras that document and enforce violations. Each layer adds a safeguard against one of the most consistent sources of fatalities in student transportation. The emotional weight of these measures becomes clear when examining past incidents. Many of the worst tragedies didn't involve rollovers, fires, or catastrophic crashes. They involved children stepping out from the bus and crossing paths with vehicles that should have stopped but didn't. The image of a brightly painted, reinforced fortress of safety contrasted with the vulnerability of a child standing feet away is why stop arm violations draw unusually strong legal penalties. Nationwide. The system recognizes what the numbers show. It is these few seconds of transition, not the ride itself, that carry the highest stakes. Technology has spread beyond enforcement cameras. In some districts, stop arms physically extend farther into adjacent lanes, forcing illegal passers to swerve rather than glide by undetected. Innovations like radar or ultrasonic sensors mounted near crosswalk zones can alert drivers if motion is detected where students could emerge. Each new tool increases the margin of notice between a child's movement and a motorist's misjudgment. While not all fleets adopt every upgrade, the principle remains: one safeguard is never treated as final. The combined narrative here is unusual compared to other vehicles. Inside, buses achieve unmatched safety through design. Compartmentalized seating, reinforced skeletons, and mass that distributes impact forces. Outside, the risks can't be solved with steel or cushions. They require constant vigilance, external laws, routine drills, and behavioral expectations across an entire community. A bus is engineered as a safe vessel, but the safety of children in its orbit depends on shared responsibility between operators, pedestrians, and outside motorists. For parents, this paradox can be jarring. Their children are safer riding inside a bus than in almost any other vehicle on the road, yet stepping a few feet into the street exposes them to the greatest risks. That sharp divide informs how engineers, lawmakers, and districts allocate their energy. It also explains why so much emphasis is put on law enforcement campaigns, parent information seminars, and repeated safety education at schools. The strategy recognizes that the protection of children doesn't end at the curb. If you're watching this and want to join in, here's a call to action. In the comments, share whether your district uses stop arm cameras, or if you've noticed extended crossing arms on local buses. That engagement not only adds perspective but spreads awareness of a problem that relies on community responsibility as much as technical fixes. The takeaway is simple but sobering. The danger zone defines the edge of the safety envelope. It's not the steel, paint, or seats that protect children there, but vigilance enforced by laws, devices, drills, and the discipline of everyone around. Inside the bus, risk is managed by engineering. Outside, it depends on choices. Choices made by drivers, schools, and parents in moments that last only seconds. And yet, even as stop arms and crossing drills save lives daily, the debate over what counts as enough safety still returns to one feature that reappears in every discussion. When parents climb aboard and notice what's missing, their first question isn't usually about stop arms or mirrors. It's about the absence of restraints on every seat. Parents ask, "What about seat belts?" Parents naturally expect the same safety cues inside a bus that they see in the family car. Every ride at home begins with a seatbelt click, so the absence of buckles on buses instantly raises questions. If belts are essential for cars, why are they not universal on school buses? The short answer is that large buses rely on a different system, compartmentalization, that cushions children in padded, closely spaced seats inside a heavy, reinforced frame. That design has already been explained earlier, but the important point here is that regulators and safety researchers still consider it the baseline standard for protecting kids in large buses. So where do seatbelts fit in? The answer depends on where you live. A handful of states require belts on certain buses, but the rules vary. Some states mandate lap shoulder belts when new buses are purchased. Others tie the requirement to funding availability or specific vehicle sizes. California, for example, enforces lap shoulder restraints on all new school buses, while other states issue more conditional rules that apply only to certain models or only if budget support exists. The patchwork reflects different political and community priorities rather than a single nationwide rule. On the federal level, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration continues to support compartmentalization as the baseline for large buses, citing its effectiveness in typical frontal crashes. At the same time, the National Transportation Safety Board has recommended lap shoulder belts on new full-size buses to improve protection in side impacts and rollovers. The result is a split message. Regulators lean on a proven decades-old design, while investigators point to situations where belts could add extra layers of protection. Parents are left navigating that tension, which explains why the issue returns so often in public discussion. Supporters of belts stress that the added security can keep children restrained in rare but severe scenarios, such as when a bus tips onto its side or slides hard in a crash. Critics respond that the scale of resources required for retrofits may not justify the marginal benefits, especially if children don't wear belts consistently or wear them incorrectly. Districts face hard trade-offs. Funding spent on equipping older buses with restraints could instead pay for new buses, enhanced driver training, or technology that reduces accidents before they happen. That budget logic has kept many states from adopting seatbelt mandates. The practical barriers go beyond cost. Retrofitting means replacing thousands of existing seats with reinforced frames that can anchor belts solidly to the floor. That often reduces seating capacity, forcing schools to add more buses and more drivers. For districts already under financial strain, these changes are nearly impossible without losing service elsewhere. Building belts into new buses is smoother, which is why states pushing mandates tend to phase them in gradually with fresh fleet orders rather than trying to overhaul large numbers of older vehicles. Parents sometimes believe that a lack of belts signals neglect, but experts generally stress that the basic design of school buses already manages risks very differently than cars. The tall padded seats, close spacing, steel reinforcement, and high vehicle mass all combine to deliver a level of safety that surpasses passenger cars, even with belts. That is why so many states and the federal government continue to support compartmentalization as the default standard for large vehicles. It isn't that belts have no value, but that the baseline safety is already unusually high without them. Still, the conversation isn't going away. A parent looking at a bus interior sees rows without restraints and understandably feels uneasy. In some states, political leaders have acted on that perception, mandating belts as a way to reassure families and provide an extra margin of protection. In other regions, officials argue that safety data shows buses rank as the safest way to move children even without belts, and that scarce resources should go to other interventions that promise a larger impact. The continuing debate keeps policies uneven across the country. There's also a possibility that the balance changes in the future. As older fleets retire and new buses enter service with updated equipment, lap shoulder belts may become more common by default. If production lines shift to make them standard, price differences will narrow, and the practical objections may ease over time. Already, some manufacturers produce large models with belts built in, ready for states or districts that choose to buy them. The long-term picture may be that belts gradually spread without a sweeping federal order, but through local choices, budget cycles, and public pressure. What this shows is that when parents ask, "What about seat belts?" they are highlighting a question that intertwines engineering, economics, and perception. Safety experts consistently emphasize that school buses already provide extraordinary protection, and that belts, while helpful in specific scenarios, do not transform overall outcomes. States that require them generally see it as responding to public concern rather than rewriting safety fundamentals. The national record, that school buses remain by far the safest mode of daily travel for students, does not shift whether belts are standard everywhere or only in some jurisdictions. The debate leaves districts balancing cost, statistical evidence, and public trust in their decisions. Families care about more than numbers. They want visible signs that safety is prioritized. Policymakers must decide whether providing that visibility through belts is worth the diversion of billions from other investments. Engineers remind the public that the real gains in bus safety have come from structural redesigns, color visibility, and now digital technology. Belt policies hover above this foundation, sometimes adding protections, but rarely reshaping the overall picture. Across the country, the conversation plays out differently depending on local rules and resources, but the underlying issue remains the same. Parents want clear signs that everything possible is being done. That expectation means the seatbelt debate will continue as long as buses run, shifting slowly with each round of fleet replacements and new research findings. And as safety rules evolve, the next wave of change is already on the horizon. Buses are beginning to adopt entirely new approaches to how they move and how they see the road. The shift isn't only about straps on seats, it's about how the buses themselves are powered and the technology guiding them on every trip. The future bus, electric and smarter than ever. The next chapter of school transportation isn't just about keeping buses strong, it's about making them cleaner and more intelligent. The conversation that once revolved around reinforced frames and padded seats now looks ahead to electric motors and computer-assisted driving tools. The future bus is taking shape as a vehicle defined by sustainability and smart technology, all while carrying forward the same mission of moving children safely. Electrification is the most visible change. For decades, the start of every school day was marked by the chug of diesel engines, clouds of exhaust, and vibrations echoing through the cabin floor. Electric buses erase much of that. Their motors operate almost silently and create fewer vibrations, offering calmer rides for students and sharper awareness for the driver who can hear movement inside the cabin or traffic outside without the backdrop of engine noise. Quieter operation also benefits the neighborhoods buses pass through, replacing the familiar rumble and fumes with a subdued hum that blends into the background of morning commutes. Air quality adds another layer. Diesel exhaust has long been linked to respiratory irritation, particularly for children who are more vulnerable to asthma and related conditions. Electric fleets reduce those emissions dramatically. Students waiting at stops or riding inside are no longer exposed to lingering fumes from idling buses. Communities see the same benefit, as every bus removed from the diesel column eases the pollution burden in local air. This shift makes electrification more than a climate measure, it's also a direct health safeguard for millions of children. The design of school routes makes the transition practical. Unlike long-haul trucks with unpredictable ranges, buses travel regular patterns with mileage that typically falls well within the limits of modern batteries. Charging can be scheduled overnight when buses are offline, and in some cases daytime charging slots can be inserted into existing school schedules without disruption. Technology has begun to line up neatly with transportation needs, making large-scale adoption realistic rather than experimental. That said, the transition is not without cost. Electric buses remain more expensive up front than their diesel counterparts. Many districts can only afford them through federal or state rebate programs. Some of the largest fleets have secured funding through the EPA's Clean School Bus Program, which provides grants that cover a significant share of the purchase price. These incentives underscore that while cleaner buses are possible today, they are not yet universally affordable without outside support. Alongside cleaner powertrains, safety technology is evolving just as quickly. Automatic emergency braking has become one of the most widely discussed tools. Using radar or cameras, these systems measure the distance to surrounding objects and can apply brakes before a driver reacts. On heavy vehicles like buses, being able to shave seconds off stopping time reduces risks both for passengers inside and for pedestrians crossing outside. Federal agencies are actively moving toward requiring AEB across commercial vehicles, a process that directly affects school buses and signals that these systems soon may no longer be optional. Layered onto these braking tools are systems that monitor blind spots. Computer vision can identify pedestrians moving in zones the driver cannot see, such as directly in front of the bumper or at the rear corners. Alerts sound before the bus moves, catching instances where a child drifting too close might otherwise be invisible. These tools don't replace vigilance, but they reduce the chance that one missed glance translates into tragedy. Driver assist features go further. Lane departure warnings alert drivers when the bus drifts across lane markings. Adaptive cruise control moderates speed in traffic. Speed monitoring sends reminders when limits are exceeded on rural or suburban routes. The features resemble those in modern cars but carry far more weight here. When dozens of children are on board, even a small reduction in error translates into substantial safety margins. These systems don't make driving simpler for convenience. They make it more secure for passengers. Automation is often raised as the logical next step. If technology can brake, steer slightly, and monitor pedestrians, why not remove the driver entirely? In practice, parents and districts remain skeptical. The trust placed in a human presence, someone accountable for behavior inside the bus as well as conditions outside, is difficult to replicate with software. Crises such as fights, medical emergencies, or severe weather all demand human judgment. While self-driving research continues, the realistic path for school buses is not replacement but support. Systems act as backups, not substitutes, aligning bus design with the long-standing principle of redundancy. This assistance-based direction preserves the role of the driver while acknowledging human limits. Cameras and radar extend their perception. Automated braking corrects delayed reactions. Alerts flag risks before they unfold. The driver still directs the bus, engages with children, and serves as the responsible adult in command. Technology is woven around them as a safety net, stepping in only when needed. This partnership mirrors earlier design philosophies that paired reinforced cages with padded seating and stop laws with crossing guards, every safeguard doubled by another. The community benefits of electrification extend beyond daily rides. Operating costs often fall over time, as electric motors with fewer moving parts demand less maintenance than diesel engines. Neighborhoods notice the quieter schedules, and some districts explore linking fleets to local power grids. Because batteries store large amounts of energy, buses plugged in overnight could potentially return power to schools or community centers in emergencies. This turns the fleet into more than transportation. It becomes a supplemental energy resource tied to broader resilience planning. Students themselves recognize the change directly. Electric buses pull away with steady acceleration instead of gear-driven jolts. They ride without the vibration of diesel engines underfoot and arrive free from the roar that once signaled their approach. Over time, these quiet, routine experiences shape how younger generations perceive normal transportation. Electric fleets become not a novelty but the expected baseline. Much like the universal presence of yellow paint, the absence of exhaust and noise can become a new tradition of its own. What matters is that these evolutions add to, rather than dismantle, existing safety strengths. Steel skeleton structures continue to protect cabins. Compartment seating continues to absorb impacts. High-visibility paint continues to attract attention in traffic. On top of these long-standing measures, electric drivetrains clean the air, AI systems prevent mistakes, and cameras catch risks beyond the driver's eyes. Each round of innovation stacks onto the previous rather than replaces it. The near future doesn't look like buses moving without supervision. It looks like fleets powered by electricity, guided by skilled human operators, and backed by intelligent systems that reduce human error. So the bus of the future will be quieter, cleaner, and smarter, while still keeping a trained adult on board. School buses, however, are not confined to one model worldwide. The changes in technology raise another question. If cleaner power and smarter systems are possible here, how are school transport solutions designed in other places? The answer begins with looking beyond US roads to see how different countries solve the same challenge in very different ways. The global school bus puzzle. Ask someone in the United States to describe a school bus, and the answer is almost always the same. A hulking yellow rectangle with tall sides, nearly indestructible steel framing, and rows of high-back seats inside. The uniform look has become iconic, so much so that people abroad recognize it instantly. Yet step across national borders and the story shifts. Buses in other countries often follow different rules, different sizes, and different cultural expectations. Parents sometimes wonder whether another system has already stumbled upon a safer solution, or if the American model is just one of several paths to the same goal. To make the comparisons clearer, here are the three broad approaches that dominate. First, some nations, including the UK, Australia, and parts of Canada, routinely install lap shoulder belts on buses by law, treating them more like miniature aircraft cabins with assigned restraints. Second, in countries like Japan, where city layouts are compact and streets are narrow, fleets often rely on smaller vans or minibuses rather than full-scale yellow coaches. Third, the United States continues to emphasize reinforced skeletons, heavy frames, and compartmentalized seating instead of active restraints. These differences reflect not accidents or oversights, but conscious design choices tailored to local realities. The Canadian system adds a detail that surprises many. Research from Transport Canada has found that while compartmentalization protects most school-aged children well, it offers much less benefit to very small children under about 18 kilograms, roughly 4.5 years old. To bridge that gap, Canada requires child seat anchor systems on new buses so the youngest riders can use age-appropriate restraints. This nuance highlights how policy adapts to developmental differences, ensuring the same bus environment can support both older students and very young children. Parents expecting a one-size solution often overlook how subtle adjustments like this change outcomes without requiring a total shift away from compartmentalization. Looking to Australia and the UK, the use of seatbelts connects back to broader public norms. Both countries have laws mandating belt use in nearly all passenger vehicles, so extending the requirement to school transport keeps standards consistent. In the UK especially, school buses often double as general coaches, transporting adults on intercity routes as well as students between neighborhoods. A belt-based layout creates one vehicle interior that supports every passenger, no matter the trip. These decisions weren't driven by accident records alone, but by the visibility of uniform laws that signal safety is consistent across all types of travel. Japan illustrates how infrastructure reshapes the entire model. With tight streets, short commute distances, and limited parking, fleets there gravitate toward minibuses that look more like extended vans than the towering American rectangles. These smaller rides carry fewer students, navigate narrow city lanes more easily, and require restraints in a way more similar to passenger cars. Journeys tend to be brief, measured in minutes rather than half-hour rides across rural roads. The vehicles mirror their environment, proving that the right fit depends as much on the shape of streets as on the shape of laws. Cross-country comparisons often leave parents asking the same question. Does one of these systems perform better, and should everyone adopt that model? The answer isn't straightforward. Each configuration, reinforced structures, added belts, scaled-down vans, shows its strength in the context it serves. American-style mass and compartmentalization work well on long rural routes because children spend sustained periods inside big vehicles built to absorb external energy. Japanese vans make sense where short trips through urban neighborhoods don't justify a full-size frame. Laws in the UK and Australia emphasize visible and consistent restraint use because those societies already tie trust and safety to wearing belts in every car. The statistics align with this picture. Despite not mandating belts broadly, American buses continue to demonstrate very low injury and fatality rates by global standards, thanks to their reinforced design and scale of use. In Canada and Australia, where belts are added, safety records are similarly strong, but the change reflects cultural preference rather than a dramatic shift in measured outcomes. Japan's minibuses show safe performance largely because their routes are short, limited to low speeds, and embedded in systems of careful pedestrian management. None of these models points to an undisputed winner. They all succeed because they are tuned to the realities around them. That balance keeps expectations grounded. Parents hope for a universal template that guarantees absolute safety everywhere, but bus design doesn't allow for a single blueprint. What serves? Children riding 30 miles down a rural US highway won't translate to 5-minute city loops in Tokyo. A structure that makes sense when laws already enforce belt use in every private vehicle may look like overreach where child management during boarding is the primary challenge. Across borders, the puzzle never resolves into one clear solution, only into local adaptations that together highlight the range of possible answers. Even so, the American model remains a reference point internationally. Its hallmark features, reinforced safety cages, tall padded seating rows, high visibility paint, and strict stop-arm laws, produce outcomes that hold up under immense scale. Canada borrows many of these structural elements, even while overlaying belt rules. The UK and Australia still point to American strength statistics when comparing outcomes, even as they extend requirements differently. Japan diverges in practice, but acknowledges its choices stem mainly from infrastructure constraints. The US approach stands not as the only version of safety, but as one consistently cited benchmark. Cultural factors push these differences as much as engineering. In the United States, traffic laws and yellow paint function together to command space for children boarding. In Europe, more reliance is placed on road signage and traffic calming design. In Canada, parental expectations of belt use influenced child seat anchor mandates. Japanese models adapt not only to street size but also to cultural assumptions about punctuality and behavior, both of which affect how vehicles load and unload. International designs, in other words, are both technical and social compromises. What emerges is a broad but clear picture. No single design dominates worldwide. Instead, each solution reflects the challenges it was built to manage. Belts serve consistency where laws demand universal restraint. Smaller vehicles enable access where roads are tight. Compartmentalized seating and mass-secure safety along long, rural journeys. Research nuances the debate, as seen in Canada's recognition that very young children need anchors for child-specific seats. These choices show that school buses, or equivalents, are never one-size-fits-all. For parents in any country, the meaningful reassurance is twofold. First, despite their differences, each system has built strong protections into daily practice. Second, systems globally share one principle. Child transportation must be safer than general transportation. Whether through belts, vans, reinforced cages, or visibility standards, every policy emphasizes that moving students deserves unique rules. So where does that leave the United States in the global puzzle? Not as the best, but as one proven model among several, notable for how design, regulation, and culture reinforce each other. American buses continue to deliver exceptional safety by combining structural engineering, mass-based protection, and strict traffic laws. Other nations reach the same goals through different paths. The lesson is not to crown one vehicle as supreme, but to recognize that safety depends on context, local roads, community expectations, and available resources. The takeaway, then, is simple. There is no universal template for the safest bus. Each country's system mirrors its environment. What the US proves is that strong engineering layered with laws and daily practice can create outstanding results at immense scale. That blend of design and discipline, more than any single feature, is what delivers safety. And that brings us back to the bigger idea. When we measure what truly makes transportation secure, the answer lies not in one piece of equipment, but in how multiple factors reinforce each other. This principle connects directly to the final point about safety itself. School bus safety rests on layers working together. Reinforced steel frames preserve the cabin, padded seat compartments absorb impact, trained drivers manage both roads and passengers, and strict traffic laws protect boarding zones. Add in modern cameras, sensors, and GPS, and the result is a system engineered for defense on every front. National data confirm the payoff. School buses remain among the safest ways for children to travel, with far lower fatality rates than private cars. That means a child is still about 70 times safer on a bus than in a family vehicle. And those same engineering lessons suggest ways to make other forms of transport safer, too. If you found something in this video that surprised you, share it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to help spread these insights further.